Hello there, viewers, and welcome to Cartoon Gateway. I'm your host, David Hollander. Here's a little known fact about me. My favorite Muppet literally changes by the second. If I open my mouth to tell you who it is, it'll create a cacophony of noise so indecipherable that it'll blow out the sound equipment we use to record. General reminder, this show is posted by Simsbury Community Media, which is open to film with if you're a Simsbury resident. And pretty soon I won't be. I'm moving on to bigger and better things. Depending on when this episode is done, I'm probably already gone. So what am I doing for my last episode of Cartoon Gateway? Remember that episode no one watched? We're doing a sequel. Nah. All the things I'd like to talk about on this show that I never got the chance to, things that never got spotlight, or ideas that couldn't sustain whole episodes. That's Stream of Consciousness for you. If you want the basics, you better watch my first version of this episode. Now, the last time I made an episode like this, it's because I was led to believe that I wasn't gonna be able to make this show again, due to changing life circumstances. Now, those circumstances are a lot more permanent. So yeah, this is the final episode of Cartoon Gateway I'll be producing with SCM. I've got very little preamble to this. I mostly wanted to thank everyone who's helped me make this series possible, including any viewers. No sentimental stuff. Let's just get into the episode. Pull up a drink, have a chair, and let's get right into it. Also, I hope you all have noticed I usually have slides behind me, at least since my second season started. Yeah, none of that. Topics are way too disparate this time. You couldn't pay me to make a slide for every individual topic this episode. Well, you could, but you aren't paying me, are you? Whatever, let's get into it. Transition, insert transition here. It's always been a regret of mine that I've always intended to watch Avatar: The Last Airbender, but never made it through the show in time to say stuff concretely about it on Cartoon Gateway. Should apologize for that. I've always known about it by reputation, that it's great and should be loved, but I just never felt motivated to watch it all the way through. Part of that's probably because I couldn't say anything new about it. Everyone already loves Atla, why should I waste your time? Part of it's probably because thanks to pop culture osmosis, I already had significant aspects of the show spoiled for me. Yeah, I know Sokka's girlfriend becomes the moon, I'm sure it's super sad, but I watched Ninjago. Jay's wife became the ocean. That's a bigger loss and more surface area. It's not the only show like this for me. Invader Zim's in a similar position, but we're talking about Atla here. So, to say my piece, here's everything I'd like to say about Atla on this show. I would have brought up the whole Ba Sing Se thing in my boring cartoons, but honestly, that episode was packed as is. What did Korra do? Sequel series, I know, but what did she do to piss off so many people? Don't say she lost a fight or she's disappointing. Those are things done to someone or qualities given to someone, not something a person does. And furthermore, how does any of that relate to all that stuff in the Seven's Havens trailer? Everyone's blaming her for. What led to that? Because the way some people online talk about her, I have to assume she manifested into physical reality and actually murdered some children. If I get to Korra and she doesn't do that, I'm gonna assume the people bleeding about her lied to me. And man, that live action series, point in geometry is defined as a specific location in space that has 0 dimensions, no length, width, or depth. Live action Atla is a pointless, and yet, much like a point, also has 0 depth. It's a geometrical paradox. Man, us cartoon-liking people really are basically just all older siblings. Nothing we have is ours forever. Every 5 seconds. Oh, hey there, little one. We're taking your things and making it live action, son.
Little girl, potted plant.
We're giving it to your brain-damaged sibling. Not like you use it. Why? Live action liking people have their schlock. Why do you insist on ruining our stuff? Is it because those people don't watch cartoons? This isn't like a building not having ramps or disability access. If people won't watch something because it's a cartoon, it is on them to expand their horizons. You don't need to make some live action version of your product to give them a worse idea of what your product is. I have never in my life looked at a cartoon and thought, let's make it less expressive, less colorful, and generally worse in every identifiable way. Who is it? Who is the single person ruining the gene pool? And how are they bankrolling these things? Oh, it's possible there's more than one person like that, but I'd like to believe in a benevolent God, so I have to assume just one. I've said it before, but I still don't get why the Ben 10 reboot was so hated when it came out. Yeah, it's not as good as the original show, but it's nowhere near as awful as other such reboots. You may disagree with me, but if I keep guessing digits randomly, eventually I'll figure out your social security number, then who's in danger? But that's not the reboot I wanted to discuss here. I wanted to talk about the Wacky Races reboot from 2017. Did you even know this was a thing? Yeah, you thought shows on CN had it bad? Imagine a show on Boomerang, the abused little brother of networks. This is a take on Wacky Races where they drastically cut down the cast, made it a lot less about racing and more like a situational comedy with occasional slapstick. It's not exactly a glowing recommendation, but I think it's worth mentioning. This show gets it. This is a show that absolutely knew no one was ever going to watch it, so it constantly breaks the fourth wall and makes jokes at its own expense.
You haven't actually watched any of the new episodes, have you?
Well, it's hard to find.
Yeah, it's humor on easy mode, but considering I've long been frustrated with CN's own scheduling habits, it's cathartic to see a show they made call them out. The result is that even though 2017's Wacky Races isn't really the best viewing experience, it's occasionally a meme goldmine, worth tracking down if you're interested in the occasional nasal exhales known as laughter. The Ben 10 reboot is close behind in that regard too. You think I can't make memes out of this show?
Do not underestimate the will of a desperate man.
I didn't talk about self-inserts, did I? In my written like fanfiction episode? One of the biggest tropes of fanfic writing, and I didn't address it at all. Two reasons I didn't. The primary one being I just couldn't find any instances of that in either show I was talking about. There's whole teams writing both Ben 10 Omniverse and Ninjago Dragons Rising. I couldn't accurately say if there was a self-insert in either of them. The other, more prescient reason, I think that self-insert is kind of a rabbit hole that doesn't end in writing. First off, let's be clear. Chances are you don't know the writers of your favorite shows. If you do, then congrats, but the vast majority of fans do not personally know the writer of their favorite show. You can never truly know what's going on in someone's head, so how can you reliably confirm that a character in something that writer has written is a self-insert? Especially in the age of social media. Yeah, I've said before I'm as honest as I could be in these videos, but you don't know that. I could be lying to you every episode. There's a non-zero chance the little known facts about me are made up. Okay, maybe more than non-zero, stay with me. You can't judge a character by having a bit of the writer in them because most do. At least in my experience writing and reading fiction, most characters have at least some of their own writer in them, intentionally or not, usually unintentionally. Making characters isn't like a cool exercise where you figure out which opinions to put on screen. It's cutting off your toes and giving them names. Sure, not every character is like that, but there's no way to reliably quantify that, not without a lot of introspection, and even then, only the writer could say for sure. Heck, even then, an intentional self-insert might end up different than the writer actually is, because the writer is going off their own perception of themselves, not who they themselves actually are. People lie to themselves all the time. So when a character is accused of being a self-insert by fans, I just get confused. Sometimes it's obvious, and sometimes a writer will even admit to doing it intentionally, but that trait can be held by most, if not every character in a work of fiction. You know, unsolicited writing advice, if you are a writer and you're going to intentionally make a self-insert character, at least do the viewers a favor and make them the villain. Take any impulses that might not fit you, anything about you that scares you, parts of yourself you don't like, and put it in someone else. Best case scenario, you learn more about yourself and can become a better person. Worst case, you get a mildly entertaining and authentic antagonist out of it. Transition. I never talked about Gunsmith Cats. I would like to talk about Gunsmith Cats. What is it? A manga series from the 1990s. Is the manga good? I don't know, never read it. In 1996, they made a 3-episode OVA that basically has nothing to do with the manga. That I did see. Was it particularly good? Yeah, but that's not why I want to talk about it. I won't die on the hill that Gunsmith Cats is the best anime ever or what have you. I'm bringing it up because Gunsmith Cats feels like something that was made specifically for me. More specifically, an anime made for a friend to tell me about and convince me to watch. It's about a pair of bounty hunters who run a gun shop in Chicago, the best city because it's the only city I've lived in so far. They drive a 1967 GT500 Shelby, the best muscle car in existence because you cannot find one cooler. The plot has them tracking down a gun running operation at the behest of the ATF, which means I get to sit back and make jokes about the ATF, one of my favorite pastimes. And of course, women. Everyone likes women. Okay, most people like women. I don't think this is some kind of masterpiece or anything. I just find it so uncanny that it includes so many of my favorite things. Transition. I'm something of a Marvel fan. This wasn't a little known fact about me in any of my videos because I don't hide that at all. As you can imagine, for better or worse, I try to keep track of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, if only because I like Marvel as a universe, and regardless of individual film quality, the MCU is an interesting case study in how to make a shared continuity between films, or in some cases how not to. It's pretty much the only massively successful cinematic universe at this moment, which makes it worth discussing. I bring this up because that success is in stark contrast to their animated universes. Yeah, Marvel has had multiple shared universes that are animated. I know that the multiverse has completely muddied the waters on canonicity as a concept, but there are a few bespoke, intended, shared universes in Marvel. And had I had the time, I wanted to do an episode on why they're not as good as the MCU. I was gonna compare the 90s MAU, if you will, to modern instances of it, as well as the quote, Yostverse, unquote, to dissect why none of them are actually shared continuities, not in the same way the MCU is, or not even in the same way as the DCAU, or the Timverse, whatever you call it. I don't have a script written, not even brainstorming. I'm not even sure my current opinions on the matter are finalized, but literally the only thing keeping me from making this episode was time. But I'd have to watch all of the modern MAU shows, all of the 90s ones, any piece of media that people have decided it was in the Yostverse over the years because even the creators can't agree, as well as X-Men 97, and thanks to Spectacular Spider-Man cinematic cameo, all of the Spider-Verse movies, and any animated MCU media, and frankly, there just weren't enough hours in the day for that. And if you wanted to see a good shared universe animated superhero stuff, DC has you covered in spades. They've been styling on Marvel for years and everything outside of movies, so I don't even know where I was going with this. I guess. Let me know if that episode interested any of you in the comments. If it does, I might just try to make that myself, separate from Cartoon Gateway. We'll see. I mentioned before that I was only exposed to the He-Man and the Master of the Universe franchise recently through the CG Netflix reboot. I realized after I said that on camera, that's a bit of a lie, or at least that's incorrect, because my actual first exposure to this stuff was Robot Chicken. And good lord, was that a hilarious way to be introduced to this series, even if it doesn't represent it that well. That's on me for assuming Beastman would still be the funniest character in existence in the actual franchise. Can we talk about Evil Lynn? When I first heard that name in Robot Chicken sketch, I'd assumed it was a joke.
Huh. You know, I always thought your name was Evelyn. It's weird. All this time it's been Evil Lynn.
Pretty clever, right?
No.
But then I watched 2021's Netflix show. Nope, that's her actual name. Nothing else to add other than that gave me a good laugh.
Later.
I seem to recall in my Bob the Builder episode, I made a joke about Muck being a genderqueer icon because the character's gender changed between dubs of the show. Yeah, that was entirely a joke. Rusty from Thomas and Friends, slightly less of a joke. Remember that Thomas spinoff that I talked about one episode ago, the one that never happened? Yeah, researching that made me fall down the Thomas rabbit hole again, and I learned something interesting. Rusty is a little diesel engine on the narrow gauge railway of Sodor. He's a recurring character throughout the show. You probably remember him from this episode about a serial killer Boulder, but I'd like to turn your attention to the Thomas and Friends wiki. Rusty was not referred to by a specific gender during the 4th to 9th series. According to series creator Britt Allcroft, she intended to make Rusty gender neutral due to criticism of the lack of female characters in Thomas the Tank Engine and Friends. So that would mean, while the character is male in later points in the show, that wasn't always the case. Rusty debuted in season 4, 1995. Season 9 was in 2005, a whole 10 years later. How did I not hear about this? This sounds like the kind of thing triggered parents wouldn't shut up about. Sure, Rusty's not a main character, but was prominent enough, and this wasn't a thing in the books the show was based on. I'll admit I can't exactly verify this myself, and I'm dubious about trusting wikis, especially after all the business with the Bob the Builder stuff, but I've seen other YouTubers like the Unlucky Tug, who actually cover this show, verify this fact. So yeah, for a decade, Rusty was non-binary, and not a soul talked about it that I could find. I haven't seen essays or articles of any kind, positive or otherwise, especially not from the time. So the next time you see someone online or in person complaining about how including a trans character in a children's show was going to make their child crazy or whatever, kindly remind them of the time Thomas and Friends had a non-binary character for 10 years and nobody even noticed. You know, I almost did a whole episode out of Solar Opposites. You know that thing from Hulu that was made by a bunch of the Rick and Morty guys, including the one that got in trouble with the law? The whole episode was going to be about metatextual stuff, especially meta-humor, which is why I was going to talk about Solar Opposites, specifically for its use of pop culture references. I think it's one of the best shows to use that kind of humor. Yeah, it's kinda low effort, but it's not for everyone, not even me, but it makes the most sense. The show is about aliens learning human culture through their media, so of course it'd be packed with references. I like that. I'd also be remiss if I didn't mention that Solar Opposites has multiple very effective shows within the show, so if you don't get attached to the main show, The Wall or Silver Cops will hold you over. I also would have brought up Venture Bros in that meta episode, which I would have brought up in the context of parody. Here's the segment I wrote about Venture Bros. A good parody isn't too specific. For example, Venture Bros is specifically a riff on Johnny Quest, but it also manages to reference the Green Hornet, the Fantastic Four, Blade, RoboCop, G.I. Joe, Voltron, Doctor Strange, the Hardy Boys, David Bowie, James Bond, Star Wars, and friggin' Scooby-Doo solely through the medium of character designs, and you don't have to be entirely familiar with any one thing that is referenced to understand the jokes they get out of them. I couldn't get a whole episode out of that. The major other show I was gonna bring up was South Park for its use of political satire. Not that I had much to say about that, other than this. If you ask me, subtlety in political satire is wasted on the audience. Satire in general, it's fun to write, but doesn't actually work if the goal is to change things. If it did, we'd be elevated light beings by now, living on the ethereal planes. Remember that time I explained how nearly every character in Steven Universe is a war criminal? Or close enough, at least? I've got a similar but milder take on another show, but spoilers for The Amazing Digital Circus. I know it's been spoiled, but hey, I recommend it and I still have principles, so spoiler warning until the next segment. With the twist of the show's finale in mind, that the main characters are not humans trapped in a computer, but brain scans of people who merely think they're human, that technically makes our characters just advanced AI. The only thing separating them from NPCs is that they have human blueprints, which technically would make Jax complicit in mass murder. Remember episode 2? When Jax let the chocolate monster into the candy kingdom? Those people were AI, just like Jax, like everyone else in this place. That whole episode was about how AI in the circus could be just as sentient as a real person, which is kind of a big tell in retrospect. I mean, yeah, Jax didn't technically pull the trigger on anyone this time, but a lot of people as real as anyone else are now dead on this bunny's watch. This isn't meant as a criticism. I know Digital Circus fans love to hear themselves talk, especially about Jax. I just think it's odd what with all the discourse surrounding the show, and this character specifically, I've never seen this brought up anywhere, and that's funny to me. I love Sam and Max, but I never found an excuse to talk about the Sam and Max cartoon on Cartoon Gateway. Honestly, my main exposure to them comes from the Telltale games anyway, so I don't know, I just never picked up the show, which is weird. I love Sam and Max, this feels weird. I don't know if this is staying in the episode. What is the opposite of something being an inspiration? A deterrent? Let me explain. I've let it slip several times that I'm a writer. We literally have to say that because if people don't know, we don't get jobs. And with that in mind, I'm sure we all know what an inspiration is. Something that inspires an idea in someone else. Now, when you watch a lot of TV and want to write TV, that can result in some overlap, and I'll admit, I'm a little too easily inspired. I had a buddy of mine once tell me that he could always tell what I'd been watching based on the scripts I'd let him read. And you know, I can't fault the guy. I fully admit, I used to make a lot of stuff way too similar to my inspirations, but not all of my inspirations are positive, and I'm sure a lot of creatives can relate. You see something, a book, movie, anything that has a good idea, but it does it so poorly or does it so differently from how you would like that you are motivated to make something that does it properly. It's like you're simultaneously Courage and that teacher lady telling him to make things perfect. Technically, that is also an inspiration, but not something that has positive connotations, something that's so irksome it makes a writer create something else. I don't think that should be called an inspiration. It's more motivated by spite than wonder. So I think this kind of thing needs a name. I can't remember for the life of me, but I remember seeing the term inspiration to edit somewhere, which I like, but it is a bit wordy for my tastes. I don't know, if someone's got a better name for this phenomenon, let me know. Transition, baby. And while on the topic of coining terminology, I think the concept of fandom, especially online fandom, really needs a better name. The fans of a particular person, team, fictional series, etc., regarded collectively as a community or a subculture. That is the literal definition of the term, and it's not very indicative of the state of online fandom, of anything really, cartoons or otherwise. Maybe I'm too sensitive to this stuff, but I'm a tad pedantic, so I appreciate when words mean things, okay? I had to grow up, watch in real time how the term fandom went from meaning a bunch of people who actually like something, might be a bit obsessive, but are otherwise harmless, to meaning organized harassment. That's all it is anymore, organized harassment. When I think fan, I think the people that make cool art or cosplay or music based on a thing they love, who may have problems with their object of fandom, but are otherwise fun to talk about and love their obsession. When I think fandom, I think of the psychopaths who sent death threats to the writers of Voltron Legendary Defender over shipping wars. I think of the grown adults who will dox actual children for having opinions. I think of the people who tried to cyberbully the Digital Circus creator into suicide. Oh, that's not what they were doing? Could have fooled me. I had a few bunnies who wanted to write stuff, who wanted to get into creative fields, but who genuinely gave up on their dreams, in part, because they couldn't handle the thought of people harassing them for their every move at any point. that was heartbreaking to watch. You'll forgive me if I'm a little miffed that these people who'd be spree killers if they weren't chronically online get to call themselves fans. Oh, that's just a vocal minority. If these people are the minority, it is the job of the majority to shut them up. Otherwise, that good majority is complicit in all of this. Good people doing nothing is worse than actual evil. So when talking about fandom, especially fandom culture, I feel this requires a greater division in language. Fortunately, all the terms I can come up with are rather crass, so I'm not gonna bother. I'm biased. Bottom line, we need a new word for these people specifically, because I'm sick of calling them fans. They're not. Relevant transition here. You know, I wrote that whole episode about cartoons made to sell toys, then watched other stuff between writing it and filming it. So bear with me as I talk about Max Steel, because I didn't have the chance before. More accurately, the 2013 reboot of Max Steel. And yeah, this is one of the only reboots I've ever seen that completely eclipsed the original series in the popular zeitgeist. When people think of Max Steel, they're talking about this show, not the original show. And if they do talk about the original, it's just the movies that came after the fact. Pretty much the only things this reboot pulls from that OG series are from the movies. I watched that reboot front to back, and I've gotta say, it's a shining example of something very specific. A show that is still good despite being painfully generic. If I told you that the basic premise of the show is kind of Jaime Reyes Blue Beetle meets Generator Rex, that's about all I can tell you without spoiling the entire plot. You'd figure out the whole thing with only a few beats. This show does basically nothing new. And yet, I still don't mind recommending it to those who are interested. If you're not doing anything new, you might as well do everything you're doing right, and Max Steel does that. Quite like it. It's got 2 seasons and 7 TV movies made after the fact. That being said, you can absolutely stop after movie number 3. Movies 4 and 5 completely change the animation style and add an entire new ensemble in what I can only assume was set up for a spin-off or a sequel series that never got properly made. It's not bad. I love Professor Mortem as a villain, but it doesn't feel like the same show. Oh, and I absolutely don't recommend the last 2 movies. Not for quality reasons, but because the only rip of movie 6 I could find online had some of the worst audio quality I've ever heard. I think the uploader tried to use AI to upscale the dialogue, and the result is that characters don't sound intelligible, dialogue is straight up missing, and the music is barely there. I didn't understand a lick of movie 6, and movie 7 is a direct follow-up to it, making that incomprehensible by extension, even though I could at least hear it. Whatever, I should have stopped much earlier, but the majority of Max Steel 2013, pretty good. You ever heard of Planet Sheen? We all know Jimmy Neutron, great show on Nickelodeon, but the sequel spin-off, Planet Sheen, isn't talked about nearly enough because it's frankly not that good and I want more people to know that. But more importantly, it's a story that cemented in me the idea that non-creative executives have no idea what they're doing in creative matters. Full respect to the job, some of you guys are just bonkers. Sure, bold of me to say that as if I never made a bad decision in my life. I'll admit to several. Who am I to blame a Nickelodeon executive for making an ill-conceived spin-off? That's the thing though. Planet Sheen wasn't conceived as a spin-off of anything. The show was pitched as Red Acres, a cartoon about a dim-witted astronaut stranded on a planet of alien morons. Apparently, Nickelodeon loved the pitch, but didn't greenlight it because it focused on an adult main character, which none of their cartoons do. Somehow, it eventually got pitched again, this time with the same premise, but as a Jimmy Neutron spin-off, focusing on Sheen and Carl after being stranded, so on and so forth. But even this heavily compromised version of the pitch was rejected, and they were told to just include Sheen, not Carl. So the show came out to basically the opposite of fanfare, but do you want to know the worst part? This character, Doppy. He's an alien, and he's almost exactly like Carl. That's the entire joke of the character. What do you mean Nickelodeon allowed this? That's what confuses and frustrates me so much about this whole specific story. You mean to tell me Nickelodeon wouldn't let the show use Carl, but then looked at Doppy, a character exactly like Carl, and said, sure. What was the point of not letting Carl on the show? At that point, why not let Carl be in it? It would have made the premise slightly more compelling. Would have been Jimmy Neutron without Jimmy Neutron, but Sheen and Carl at least work as a duo. What do you mean the decision makers didn't even stand by their convictions that kneecapped the show in the first place? There's also a similar story of Billy's nose from the Grim Adventures of Billy and Mandy. You know, they tried to micromanage the size of his nose only for the animators to settle on what they wanted to do anyway. Long story short, that's just another story of how a non-creative tried to butt in just to look busy. Whatever. The point is, however business savvy they can be, however helpful on occasion, non-creative executives can be 1,000 times less logical than even the most spaced out creative. It's a shame that I never got the chance to talk about Fairly Odd Parents: A New Wish, because I did watch that one front to back. It's a sequel to Fairly Odd Parents, and I think it might be the best one. Not that the others are exactly good competition, but it's more than that. A New Wish is, by my estimation, a better show than classic Fairly Odd Parents. Or at least it's more like what I want in a show. It's just like classic Fairly Odd Parents, but it's visually impressive, and it's not making constant marriage sucks jokes. Like, seriously, I rewatched classic FOP recently. I forgot how unrelenting that specific joke was, and they get old quick. So A New Wish is comparatively much more wholesome than classic FOP and much more engaging. I don't dislike the classic series, but I'm more inclined to give this a rewatch. I would have brought it up in my Families in Animation episode, but I wasn't done with the show at the time, if memory serves. I don't even remember if the show was out by the time that episode aired. I don't know. And while we're on the subject of recommendations, I don't think I emphasized enough how much I recommend Maya and the Three. To reiterate, this series is really good, and I implore people to give it attention. Worth watching, and on occasion, absolutely brutal when it needs to be. I cried watching this, and I admit that with no shame. I mean, I say all this having not watched it since my first viewing, at least not in its entirety. I watched it front to back once and will occasionally see bits of it since, but I haven't seen it as a whole since I watched it all the way through the first time. Man, recommendations are weird, aren't they? I'll recommend something to someone, but it's not like I'm itching to rewatch them myself at any given moment. Like, Soul is one of my favorite Pixar movies, and I'd recommend it in a heartbeat, but I wouldn't just sit down and watch it myself on a whim. I gotta be in a specific mindset. Whatever, I never found an excuse to talk at length about Maya and the Three, and I would have liked to, but in any case, you won't regret watching this. It's 9 episodes anyway, so even if it doesn't light your world on fire, you might as well finish it. I would have talked a lot more about Invincible over the course of the series if I were confident I could talk about a show that's mostly an adult thing for more than 20 minutes. Futurama could only handle like 15. So sorry to anyone expecting me to do whole episodes on Close Enough, Drawn Together, or Supermansion, I don't know. There's been a lot of discourse about the animation of Invincible, and I guess since these kind of things usually get blown out of proportion by bleeding sheep, I wanted to say my piece, try to be level-headed, and reiterate that the show looks fine. Sure, it's not spectacular, but there are compromises, but it's fine. I've tolerated cartoons animated with the frame rate of a slideshow. Invincible doesn't look that bad to me. And when it needs to look amazing, it usually does, so I don't have that much of a problem with how the show looks. That's what I was going to say. Then, X-Men 97 came back with another season. Look at this. This is what all action shows should look like, if not most of them. Then I look back at Invincible, and I'm left wanting. The average fight in X-Men 97 styles on some of the best stuff Invincible has to offer. And I know X-Men 97 has Disney money behind it, but you know who should probably be the only company that should be able to rival Disney in terms of putting money behind stuff because they have it lying around? Amazon. So this segment got away from me. Ultimately, as far as I'm concerned, Invincible still doesn't look horrendous. A lot of people who say it does are just clickbait grifters, but make no mistake, it should absolutely look better than it does. And that's entirely because the relevant departments are under budget and short-staffed. Hoping this ages poorly, by the way. Do I have to take a stance on AI art? Probably should, considering I still champion animation as an art form, especially cartoons. I'm thankful for AI tools. I mean, it's thanks to one such tool I was able to fix one of my favorite episodes of the show after realizing I'd uploaded it with audio problems. Remember episode 12? I can watch my Transformers episode because of AI tools. I'm thankful for that. But as for generative AI and AI art, not my speed. Look, to my mind, mildly interesting technology simply doesn't justify the cost of running it, either from the taxpayer or environmental costs. The only context I could think of where it was okay to use is in the event you need placeholder art, which granted it functions, but it's not good placeholder art, not in my experience. You don't want to see the pitch decks I've been forced to make with this stuff. That said, I think I've got to come clean about something. I'm a bit of a hypocrite. This image, the literal Cartoon Gateway in my title card, in most of my title cards, was AI generated. Not using any commercial software. I think we just had Photoshop's Gen AI at the time, and I wasn't skilled enough to make something good. But that was back in the early 2020s. I think I and many others were a little ignorant of the issues with AI art beyond just not looking the best. True to my word, I always intended to replace the thing. Find an artist to make an actual Cartoon Gateway design, pay them everything. But I can only make this show when I'm in town between traveling. And if you haven't noticed, that's not often. I am usually in a rush when making these, so I never got the opportunity to do that. So I could either leave that there as a reminder of my failures and motivation to be better, or I could just swap it and be better.
Hey folks, viewer mail time again. Oh, here's one from Sally, age 14. Dear Pig, aren't you interrupting the story at the most suspenseful part? Well, the answer is yes, Sally. Yes, I am. Keep those cards and letters coming.
It's weird to think about. I've been doing this show for nearly 3 years now. And I gotta be honest, not everything's aged the best. I'm not just talking about the production quality. I expected to grow as an editor and such when I started. I mean, some of the stuff I've said on this show is straight up wrong. Sometimes I make mistakes. My recollection of a show might be incorrect, or some things get messed up in translation. Or heck, my opinions can change. There's stuff I've said on here that I do not agree with anymore. There's one example that I think actually needs unpacking since I kind of contradicted it recently. Remember in my last Stream of Consciousness episode when I said one of the reasons I don't cover indie shows is because I'd seen a lot of failure in that field? I didn't trust myself not to project my insecurity onto actual independent shows and be overly negative. Barring that, I had an incident where I had to change a character's name in a project I was writing because an indie pilot that subsequently got picked up ended up using the same name for a character of their own, and without wishing to name names, that character is now very marketable and they have that name by comparison, and I'm still a little salty about that, whatever. Look, I'm happy to say I've largely grown out of that phase. I can now trust myself to talk both positively and negatively about indie shows without letting my insecurity get in the way. You've seen this in a few episodes of mine. I've brought up Camp, Digital Circus, Eleverse shows, and I trust myself enough to talk Space King now. That would have been fun to talk about, and if I ever found the opportunity. I said back then, I'm an ongoing project, though it probably helps that one of those indie projects that I had a lot of thoughts on got bought by Amazon, making it go from indie to industry. For what it's worth, I still think Glitch production stuff counts as indie, at least in the sense that they aren't policing what their creators make or censoring material against their creatives' wishes. I'm getting off track. The point is, I've said things on this show that have aged poorly. Some for reasons out of my control, some because I've grown as a person. And frankly, I'm not gonna sit here and relitigate every single one, because we'd be here all day. We all have better things to do with our time than sit here and watch me be a revisionist. I was a revisionist once. Episode 12, when I fixed it and re-uploaded it, it's not just the audio problems that I fixed. Yeah, after I took episode 12 down, I realized there was a comment under it, one that I wanted to engage with, and by doing that, I wouldn't be able to respond to it, so I put a text response in the updated video. Yeah, I know, hypocrite, but look, being a revisionist at one time was a lot more trouble than it was worth, so I'm done with it. Besides, no matter what I change or don't change, regardless of what I feel, every episode of the show is a time capsule when I had certain thoughts or feelings. You wouldn't desecrate a memorial, and the versions of me that are no longer with us would appreciate being left alone. You know, I said before that if I ever did a whole episode about Spectacular Spider-Man, that'd be my last episode. So I guess since this is my actual last episode, I should talk about it, right? I could waste everyone's time talking about how it's one of my favorite shows, how it's a good adaptation of Spider-Man, or how there's so much to love about it. But you knew that, everyone knows that. Why would I waste your time? Instead, I'm gonna talk about all the things I don't like about it. Consider this my proof in practice. Fans of stuff can totally express displeasure with something they love without being psychopathic about it. I don't like how Kraven's just a lion man. I get that human Kraven isn't as threatening as some of these guys that Spidey's fought at this point, but I would have preferred to see classic Kraven a bit longer. Better yet, introduce the guy earlier in the show, then have him become this thing in season 2. What was with that Gwen glow up thing? Yeah, they made Gwen more attractive in the latter chunk of the show. First off, debatable. Second, she looks more like Sally now, which means I have to double take every time I see her, so her design is worse on principle. Molten Man is one of my favorite villains in the show, but he's also one of the last ones they introduced, so he barely gets any time in the spotlight. Silvermane is completely non-threatening. Like, there had to be a way to make this guy more imposing. His first fight with Spidey was a 3-on-1 and he still lost. He could have been more of a physical threat. I'm curious, were they ever intending on revealing to Dr. Octopus that Spidey didn't cause his accident? Because it doesn't seem like it, and I would have loved to see this version of him figure that out. As much as I love this version of Mary Jane, Vanessa Marshall's performance kind of gives her resting, seductive voice, which works for some of her lines, but not all, and Sandman takes a while to get used to. I can't be the only one that hears that. I think Sandman's redemption goes a little too fast. I'm glad I got to see it considering how short the show was cut, but what were they planning to do with the guy for the next 3 seasons they didn't get? When the Enforcers get actual supersuits and identities in season 2, why does Fancy Dan suddenly become Ricochet? That's a different Spider-Man related guy. A fitting name, but annoying because it's not his. Last transition. Do you want a sentimental ending? I'm probably going to think of 1,000 more things I would have liked to have talked about in this show the second this camera turns off, and I've got no clue what's gonna happen once I leave the studio, this state where my life is gonna go. Whatever happens, wherever I end up, I'm glad I got to make this, and if this show has brought even a little bit of joy or mild amusement to anyone, then I did my part. Tune in to other episodes of Cartoon Gateway for more cartoon discussion, or maybe more little-known facts about me, such as my second favorite Muppet is actually quite set in stone. It's Hilda.
Like our high school graduations.
But today, SEM faces a challenge.
Our funding structure is based on television subscriptions.
And it's no secret, people have been cutting the cord.
With a shift to internet-only subscriptions,
SEM receives less revenue,
even though all our programming is freely available online.
We need your support.
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 Your donation can make a difference.
It will ensure that SCM remains open,
continues to educate our youth,
and keeps our community informed.
Thanks to SEM, I've been honing my creative skills, helping me work towards my college degree.
SCM is crucial for keeping our community connected.
SCM isn't just here to broadcast local events. They're actually preserving Simsbury's history.
Join us.
Join us in preserving Simsbury's voice.
Simsbury's voice.
Together we can ensure that SCM continues to thrive
for generations to come.
Visit our website
or scan the QR code on your screen to make your donation.
Every contribution
counts.
Thank you for supporting Simsbury Community Media,
where your town,
your schools,
and your government
come together.